All our economic policies, be they free trade agreements or foreign manpower policies, are about creating jobs for our people and helping Singaporeans achieve their aspirations. Every detail matters. Many of you will remember Mr. Lee Kuan Yew took special care to make the road leading from Changi Airport to the city as attractive as possible to impress foreign investors. They see this tree-lined road and their first impression is that this is a well-run place, able to plan and implement. So it's safe to invest here and create jobs here. The PSP assumes that if we reduced the number of foreigners here, then all these jobs will automatically go to Singaporeans. Mr. Leong has a euphemism for it. He called it, in one of his earlier Facebook posts, rebalancing. But it's quite clear what he means. In one post, he said we can get rid of tens of thousands, I quote, tens of thousands of work pass holders, and he thinks that Singaporeans can fill these jobs. But that thinking is fatally flawed. First, we already have more than 25,000 PMET vacancies today, with many companies still looking to hire. With so many companies having difficulties filling these vacancies, how would we find people with the relevant skill sets to take on the additional tens of thousands of jobs that Mr. Leong thinks can be created by getting rid of the foreigners? Second, if our policies were to become overly restrictive, companies will just find other places to operate in where they can be more competitive. We would lose all the jobs they brought here. And if we are not careful, decades of hard work to build up our business hub will be wasted. Our economy will contract and go down in a tailspin. We'll end up with far worse problems, and it's not the foreigners, but Singaporeans who will ultimately pay the price. Let's say we go back to the 1990s. Back then, we were not as developed as a hub economy, so foreign PMETs accounted for just 10% of our PMET workforce. But remember, our overall standards of living were also much lower then. In 1995, that's the earliest I could get data on, our GDP per capita was just around $35,000 instead of more than $80,000 now. And median salaries of residents were less than $2,000 compared to around $4,500 today. Is that what we want? Stagnate in the 1990s while the rest of the world progresses around us? Remember how Mr. Lee Kuan Yew once said, "Never fear, 10 years from now this will be a metropolis." What do Mr. Leong and the PSP promise? 10 years from now, we will go back 30 years?
We have debated the same issues in February 2013 at the Population White Paper debate. But Singaporeans' job and livelihood did not improve after that. The government says we have not enough talents, but there are many underemployed Singaporeans, and we have a world-class education system with world-class universities and polytechnics. This government says the jobs required skills that Singaporeans don't have. But you mean so many Singaporeans cannot do the jobs of those average work pass holders? This government says discrimination is confined to a minority. But don't you see the concentrations in companies, industries, and workplaces? The whole situation gave the impression that this government is not well coordinated within itself. Each ministry may be trying to do its best, but the whole government is not aligned to achieve the best outcome. The misalignment that Senior Minister Teo Chee Hean spoke of at the Population White Paper debate in 2013 seems not to be resolved yet. Today's debate continues to be handicapped by the government's unwillingness to give full disclosure on immigration and employment data, not just restricted to the nationality data, but a lot of other data.
Mr. Leong, you have repeatedly commented on Seeker, comments which carry clear racial undertones. For example, your post on the 22nd of June 2021, the most important economic policies, I quote, that have affected the jobs and livelihoods of Singaporeans relate to foreign PMETs and free trade agreements, in particular the Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement with India. But today we heard you say that you are in favor of free trade agreements. So is it that you are in favor of free trade agreements, but specifically oppose Seeker? That's what it looks like, based on what you have said so far. Your comments have troubled your own PSP members. They have said that your statements in Parliament on Seeker were targeting the Indian community. You protested here that you are not a racist and that these statements and sentiments ascribed to you are a diversion and a distraction. But your party members are quoted as saying that you are targeting the Indian community. And I quote, they say it is totally a racial undertone. Mr. Leong, your statements have been interpreted by your own party members as being racist. People in your party think your statements are racist. Would you accept? I don't expect that you will accept that you are racist, but would you accept that people in your party think that your statements are racist and have said so? It's a simple factual statement. May I seek that clarification from Mr. Leong, Mr.
Yes,
Speaker?
please.
So, just one or two party members mentioned that what I'm doing in Parliament today is anti-racist. That doesn't mean I'm anti-racist. Thank you. That doesn't mean I'm
not
racist.
anti-racist.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yes.
I beg your pardon. That doesn't mean I'm racist. Yeah. Thank you. Minister?
Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Leong. So your party members, you say some, think you are racist based on your statements. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, can I ask Mr. Leong to confirm that therefore other Singaporeans may also go away with similar view that what he says is racist? And second, Mr. Leong says they've got nothing to object to Seeker and other FTAs. I think it's an important statement, and I would like that recorded. If you look at the motion which I read out, it highlights Seeker. I'm just trying to understand whether Seeker has a special place in Mr. Leong's affection and mind, or is it treated the same as all the other FTAs? And if it's the same as all the other FTAs, why is Seeker getting special mention? That's all. A simple answer would do.
Mr. Leong?
The focus of the debate today is on the impact of our foreign talent policy on jobs and livelihood. So we are focused on all the work pass holders, not one particular nationality. But
Mr. Leong, if you can answer the Minister's question, which is a straightforward one, because if it's just FTAs in general, then why is Seeker being flagged up specifically?
because there are data, we want to know more about Seeker.
No, but you do want to know more data about any of all the other FTAs, right? From what you were alluding to earlier?
Yes, that's
So
why we have...
why no mention of the other FTAs, but Seeker in particular?
No, but in our motion, we say FTAs and Seeker. Right? So FTAs are inside the motion.
Minister?
I think Mr. Leong doesn't know his own motion. It says in some FTAs, like CECA. So there are some FTAs which don't concern him, and there are some FTAs which concern him. This is your own motion, Mr. Leong.
Yes,
Just tell us what it means and why CECA.
yes, I say some FTAs like SECA. So these are the FTAs, including SECA, there are
Which ones? Sir, if I may ask, which ones?
Mr. Leong.
including the Australian FTAs, the China FTAs, the US FTAs, for example.
Sir, may I ask through you, which aspects of the China FTA, the US FTA, and the Australian FTA bothers Mr. Leong, like CECA?
Mr. Leong.
Okay, for the Australian FTA also contained a clause on allowing the ICT to bring in dependence. For the China FTA, we are looking at the China FTA to compare with the SECA FTA because both countries have very big population. For the US FTA, we have received feedbacks from residents about why US citizens are allowed to buy properties in Singapore without paying the ABST, the additional buyer's stamp duty. So some of these FTAs, as I say, we have to look at it on a case-by-case basis.
Minister.
Thank you. Sir, my understanding, therefore, is that Mr. Leong is equally concerned about the US FTA, the China FTA, the Australian FTA, and CECA, and that CECA is not specifically being singled out. If I may just have that confirmation before I move on.
Mr. Leong.
That is correct, Minister.
Thank you. And overall, we have, I think, sir, Mr. Leong's confirmation that he supports FTAs. Now, Mr. Leong, it's commonsensical, isn't it, that those PSP members will not be the only ones who think that your statements are racist. If they can think like that, your own party members, the other Singaporeans can reasonably think that your statements are racist too. It's a simple point.
Yeah,
Mr. Leong?
so okay, actually just now my answer is going to that point. Okay, but doesn't mean that some accused somebody who is trying to find out more and trying to discuss about an economic agreement thinks that person is racist, then we need to shut up the whole discussion.
No, we're not talking about shutting out. In fact, we are having a long debate. We are going to be here for very long.
All right, yeah.
And it'll be even longer if we don't get answers. So nobody is shutting anybody out. Just a logical conclusion.
Mr. Leong.
There will be some people who will think that there's racial undertone. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I now move on to the third part of my speech on what needs to be done to repair the local-foreign divide. I make 5 suggestions which I will elaborate on in turn. 1. Policies and procedures must be introduced to more effectively promote and track skills transfers from foreigners to Singaporeans. 2. Fixed-term employment passes tied to skills transfers should be considered. 3. The problem of underemployment must be tracked and solved. 4. The government should consider setting up a parliamentary standing select committee dedicated to overseeing this issue of jobs and foreign employment. And 5. The government needs to communicate more and much better on jobs and foreign employment than it has been doing up to now.
Now, ultimately, the best thing we can do for our locals is to continually invest in them, to help them adapt and compete. But it seems that the PSP would want us to take a more effortless route and simply target the 400,000 foreign PMATs they say are here. In fact, as Mr. Leong noted, the number of EP and S-Pass holders has fallen to 350,000. How much lower does he want it to go? 300,000? 200,000? Or maybe zero? Ms. Hazel Phua has painted a simple narrative that if we keep labour supply tight, it will contribute to productivity improvements and a higher wage growth for Singaporeans. But at a certain point, a tight labour market can also lose us opportunities and the ability to internationalise. This can cost us jobs and wage growth in the long run. It is not such a simple linear relationship. I will say this plainly to Mr. Leong. What he and his party spew, attacking CICA and FTAs and foreigners in general, has an effect on IMD's assessment and on business sentiments, both here and overseas. Investors watch and wonder how many other Singaporeans feel this way. Has Singapore become less welcoming of foreign investments, of global talent? Why do you think we're taking this issue so seriously? In July, Minister Ong and myself made ministerial statements. We decided to confront Mr. Leong openly. In August, the Prime Minister addressed the issue again in his National Day rally speech. And now in this debate, three ministers have spoken thus far, myself for the second time. Do Mr. Leong and his party think Singapore will forever be attractive to investors? Is there some magic water? Stupid. Is there some magic water that draws global multinationals here and that all this happens spontaneously?
The PSP's own members have expressed this concern, which my colleague Mr. Shanmugam said just now. According to media reports, one senior PSP member said that focusing on CICA is, quote, cheap politics. Another member said there are racial undertones with how the CICA issue is being raised in Parliament, and the, quote, real problem is not about CICA. So these are voices that the PSP's own members have said, that Singaporeans have highlighted. Mr. Leong and Ms. Hazel Phua keep saying, no, we are not racist. We are not stirring racist sentiments. But look, if it looks like a duck, if it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, it is a duck. Whatever Mr. Leong or Ms. Hazel Phua may say, the fact is that this is how people see and perceive the PSP campaign.